There's a man in the Bible who had more gold coming in every single year than most ancient kingdoms saw in a decade. Peace on every border. A palace it took 13 years to build. A reputation so massive that a queen crossed a desert just to see if the rumors were true. And near the end of his life, he sat down and wrote that all of it was vapor. Not hard, not complicated, vapor. Something you can't hold on to no matter how tightly you close your hand. That man is King Solomon. And the uncomfortable part isn't that he failed to get rich, it's that he got everything and still wrote that down. Solomon was the third king of Israel, son of David, ruling at what tradition remembers as the high point of the whole kingdom, sometime around the 900s BC. But here's what a modern viewer misses. In that world, a king's wealth wasn't a personal flex, it was his resume. Gold reserves, a full harem of politically married foreign wives, monuments that took over a decade to raise, that's how a king in the ancient Near East proved to everyone watching that he was legitimate, chosen, backed by God. Solomon's fortune wasn't private indulgence, it was a public argument he was making with his life, every single day, to every neighboring kingdom. And here's the detail that should stop you. The Bible says his temple, the one built for God, took 7 years to build. His own palace took 13, almost twice as long. The book doesn't comment on that, it just tells you the numbers and lets you sit with them. Solomon didn't start out chasing gold. Early in his reign, according to 1 Kings chapter 3, God appears to him and basically says, ask for anything. Anything. And Solomon doesn't ask for wealth. He doesn't ask for a long life. He doesn't ask for his enemies handed to him. He asks for wisdom to actually govern his people well. And the story tells us God is pleased with that request specifically because Solomon didn't ask for riches and gives him wisdom and then adds the wealth and honor on top, unrequested. That's worth sitting with for a second because it's the whole thesis of this video in miniature. The wealth wasn't the goal, it was the byproduct of something else. If you're building anything right now, a business, a portfolio, a career, that's worth pausing on. The version of Solomon the text respects most is the one who wasn't optimizing for net worth at all. But this matters. The text also drops a quiet detail right before that famous request, almost easy to skip past. Solomon had already married Pharaoh's daughter, a political alliance marriage. The compromise pattern didn't start after the gold arrived. It was already running in the background before the story even gets to the part everyone remembers. For a while, it looks like Solomon is living the dream he was handed. He builds the temple. He builds trade partnerships with kingdoms like Tyre. His administration runs the country so smoothly that the text says people just ate, drank, and were content. And then the Queen of Sheba shows up, probably from a wealthy trading kingdom in southern Arabia, tests him with hard questions, and leaves stunned, showering him with gifts. This is peak Solomon, wisdom and wealth performing for the entire watching world. But right after that peak, in 1 Kings 11, the story turns, and it turns in a way most retellings flatten into something too simple. Solomon accumulates 700 wives and 300 concubines. And here's what people usually get wrong. They tell this like it's one dramatic fall, a single bad decision. It's not. The text is describing a pattern repeated over years, alliance by alliance, each one probably justified in the moment as smart diplomacy. And somewhere in that accumulation, his heart gets turned toward other gods, until he's literally building worship sites for them. Here's the part that should actually unsettle you more than the wives themselves.
This wasn't Solomon stumbling into something nobody warned him about. Centuries earlier, in Deuteronomy 17, there's an explicit law written for future kings of Israel. Don't multiply wives. Don't multiply horses. Don't pile up silver and gold for yourself, because it will turn your heart away. Solomon knew this rule. He'd been trained in this exact wisdom tradition. And the text never says his wisdom left him. He keeps administrating. He keeps writing Proverbs. That's the more uncomfortable read here. This isn't a story about a wise man becoming foolish. It's a story about a wise man knowing exactly what he was doing and doing it anyway, one exception at a time. This is where the modern parallel actually lands. And it's not just money can corrupt you, because that's too vague to do anything with. Look at the actual mechanism in the text. It wasn't the size of any single decision. It was that no single alliance ever felt big enough to break the rule over. Each marriage was defensible on its own. That's exactly how unexamined financial or business decisions compound in real life. Nobody blows up their integrity, their marriage, or their health in one dramatic move. It's the 10th reasonable compromise that was never audited against the rule you already knew, because each one, on its own, seemed too small to matter. And the cost of Solomon's wealth wasn't abstract either.
Those building projects, the temple, the palace, entire store cities, were funded partly through forced labor, conscripted work gangs from his own population. That detail matters later, so hold on to it. God's response in 1 Kings 11 isn't total destruction. It's a judgment with mercy folded into it. The kingdom will be torn away, but not in Solomon's lifetime, for his father David's sake, and one tribe will stay with his family line regardless. But real adversaries do rise up while Solomon is still alive and still wealthy. His wealth doesn't buy him out of consequences that start showing up on his own watch. Then Solomon dies, 40 years on the throne, and almost immediately his son Rehoboam refuses to ease up on that forced labor his father built the kingdom's gold on, and the whole thing splits in two. The wealth Solomon spent his life accumulating didn't even manage to hold together the kingdom it was supposedly building. Which brings us to Ecclesiastes. Tradition holds this was Solomon looking back on his own life, though it's worth being honest that many modern scholars think it may have been written later by someone using his voice as a literary frame. Either way, the content matches the man in the story. He says he built houses, planted vineyards, gathered silver and gold beyond anyone before him, denied himself no pleasure. And then he looked at it all and called it hevel, vapor. Not wasted effort, vapor. Something with no weight, no grip, gone the second you try to hold it. So here's the sentence to actually take with you. Massive wealth without a clear purpose behind it doesn't produce satisfaction. It produces emptiness, because accumulation was never designed to be the answer in the first place. And here's the one thing to actually do with that this week, not someday. Take your top 3 financial goals for this year, and for each one, write down the specific person, relationship, or purpose it serves, something beyond the number itself. If you can't finish that sentence for one of them, that's not a goal to keep chasing blindly. That's the one to interrogate before you spend one more month on it. Here's your question, and it's not rhetorical. Pick the financial goal you're currently working hardest for, not the vague one, the specific one. Now finish this sentence out loud. I want this because. If what comes out is just a bigger version of the goal itself, more money so I have more money, that's worth sitting with honestly. I want to be upfront about something too. This story doesn't hand you a clean formula, and Solomon's own history is genuinely more complicated than rich man learns a lesson. Some of what surrounds him, the exact scale of his kingdom, even who physically wrote Ecclesiastes, is debated by historians and scholars, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to make the story tidier. What isn't in dispute is what the text itself says he built, what he did, and what he concluded about it in his own words. If this is the kind of history you want more of, real detail, not flattened morals, subscribe and let me know in the comments which financial goal you just interrogated. Next time, we're looking at a very different kind of leader who had the opposite problem. Someone who had almost nothing and built something that outlasted every empire around him.